My name is Maria Kukta, and as part of the engagement team, our goal is to lead our church to engage the community with the love of Christ. I wanted to share a little bit with you about how I became engaged here at Holiday Hill. So my family has been here for a while. We've been attending for about 6 years and have always felt like Holiday Hill has been warm and inviting and really just felt like home. But when I really felt connected, when I really felt like that sense of belonging and purpose was when I was asked to help out with Vacation Bible School. And so as the planning process started, I was working with Kim and with Esther. And of course, when you work alongside people, you get to know them and you know their family, which makes you feel connected. And then the next opportunity within VBS was when we had a day for the church members to come up and to help us decorate and prepare for the week ahead. It was really neat to watch everyone from different walks and different backgrounds come up and unite for one purpose, and that was to share Jesus with our community. And beyond that, being able to work with some of those same people to actually share Bible stories and songs and games with our community. So when you took a step back and you were able to see all the different facets, I made connections because I was around people that were different than who I was normally around. I got to know about them and their families, and then I also connected with our community. So I want to challenge you. If you feel like that you have a gift or a talent or that nudge from the Lord, don't ignore it. Get involved, get engaged. Sure, it's adding one more thing to that list, and sometimes you're tired and don't feel like it. But I promise you that when you choose to engage and you choose to serve with others, that yes, you're helping other people, but the blessing that you get from that, being obedient to the Lord, you grow closer in your own relationship and your own walk. So I encourage you to do that. I'd really like to share a quote with you from a book that I'm reading. It's called Growing Up, and it's by Robert Gallaty. Let me share that with you now. As they lived, labored, and learned together, the Spirit of Jesus was in their midst. We too will find that as we commune with other believers, we will enjoy the presence of Christ in a deeper, more vibrant manner. I've certainly found that to be true for myself, that I have a deeper relationship with my own self with the Lord simply by being engaged and working together for that common goal. Today, Pastor Josh continues with the series, A People of Influence and Engagement. He'll be preaching today out of Acts chapter 17. If you're interested in finding a way to engage our community, please come see me or speak with John Daly. We'd love to help you.
Well, good morning. Welcome to Holiday Hill Baptist Church. I am Joshua Slocum, student pastor here at Holiday Hill. Pastor Albert is not with us today, so I'm filling in for one more Sunday with you guys as we are doing a series about influence and engagement. And we're looking at different aspects, different facets, different angles of influence. And today we talk about how influence starts, it begins with people. But here's the thing with people. Sometimes they could be scary. There are things that could scare us. And in doing research for this, I found some interesting fears and phobias. Some of them are common. The first one is arachnophobia, the fear of spiders. Some of you are cringing right now. Exactly like, nah. Like, have you seen the ones in Australia? Oh my gosh, they're huge. It's insane. Yeah, so there's arachnophobia. And then there's some people that have acrophobia, the fear of heights. I'm not that guy. You put me on a 300-foot roller coaster, I am ready to go, hands in the air, waving them like I just don't care. It's like, we're going to do this big, tall thing. It costs money. How much money does it cost? It doesn't matter how much it costs. I'm going to go do the big, tall thing that costs money. Like, I am that guy. I love acrophobia. But there are some people in our college ministry, not fans. I may or may not have witnessed a 21-year-old, 6'4", 300-plus pound grown man scream like a little girl in the Tower of Terror. Theoretically, of course, not like I'm naming anyone. But, again, some people are scared of heights. But then there's like I said, there's like some different ones. Here's one that is so definitive of the 21st century. You may have not known about this one. Nomophobia, the fear of losing or being without your mobile phone. Yes, this is real. No mobile phone, nomophobia. Yeah, the fear of being without our phone. I'm not going to have my phone. I feel cold. everything feels cold on the inside. Someone might be texting me. Someone might be liking my Instagram post, and I don't know who it is because I'm away from my phone. When our phone goes into brick mode, our day is over, our day is shot. We miss all the messages. Everyone's angry at us. There was a day, you could call people and leave a thing. You can leave a message on what's called an answering machine at their house. And then when they get home 5-10 hours later, they check the answering machine. Oh, but it's late. I'll call them tomorrow. You might not get a response till 24, 48 hours later. Not anymore. It's instantaneous. And what happens if someone calls me and I can't instantly respond to them? Nomophobia. Then there's this one that we're going to talk about today, agoraphobia, the fear of people, the fear of large crowds. I'm around people, and here's the thing about people. People are messy. We're called to be ministers. We're called to be influencers. We're called to engage. We're called to do these things, but people are messy, and movies really don't do them justice. Movies, by design, are meant to be contained. Get all you need to get out in about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So there's a person, and then they meet someone, and then they maybe fall in love, or they build a friendship, and maybe there's a small little roadblock, a small little bump in the road, but in the end, it's happily ever after. It gets resolved in 2 hours. But relationships with people rarely work out that way. People are messy. People fall off the wagon. People misinterpret things, especially on social media and text messaging. How do we do this? What about people who I don't like people. I'd rather just sit in my corner. I love my phone. Nomophobia actually sounds like my newest, greatest fear, right? I want to sit in my corner. I want to play on my phone. That's what I want to do. What do we do about this fear that we may have, this anxiety we may have when it comes to people, when we are called to engage and influence? This is something that Pastor Albert and I have joked about for years. We've said in the office more times than you may realize, and we would say this: ministry would be great if it weren't for all the people. Ministry would be great if it weren't for all the people, because again, sometimes people are messy. People misinterpret things. Sometimes you engage people who are nice and happy and pleasant and positive. And most of us would agree we like those people. But then there's some people that are ornery, they're obstinate, they're grouchy and grumpy and negative. It doesn't matter what kind of situation it is, it's the worst day ever for them. And we don't want to be around those people, and it seems sometimes there's more of those people than the nice, happy ones. But again, we're called to engage. We're called to influence. How do we work around these people? How do I engage these people? How do I work with these people? Again, we're supposed to influence, and influence begins with people. But gosh, people, man, I don't know. How does this work? So today, what I want to share and walk through with you guys is a passage out of the book of Acts. We're in Acts chapter 17. Acts chapter 17 is where we're going to be this week. Acts chapter 17. And the reason we're going to be at Acts 17 is because the Apostle Paul, which is a guy who is preaching about Jesus, a guy who's preaching the gospel, preaching good news, sharing the truth and the love of Christ with people, not just in his area, but in his perspective, what he would consider to be globally, regionally, his whole realm, his whole sphere that he could travel to. He's sharing Jesus with all these different people. And with different people, you have different cultures. You have different walks of life. And he's doing this in a large part of the book of Acts. And in Acts chapter 17, he finds himself in a place called Athens, Greece. Athens, Greece is where he finds himself. Now, most of us might know what Greece is. They're like, it's the movie with John Travolta. No, not that Greece. Go Greece. No. It's actually the nation of Greece. They used to be a world empire. And though the Roman world is now the Roman world, the Romans rule the whole thing, Greece still has a huge influence in the culture and time of where Paul was at. If I could give a parallel of what Greece is at this moment, it would be either Hollywood or New York. One of those things like, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. That kind of idea for New York. That Hollywood, this is where your entertainment capital is. These are the people that determine what's going to fly and what's going to die. What's going to work out and what's not going to work out. What is cool, acceptable, and fashionable, and what is lame, dumb, and isn't going to do anything amount of good. This is the hub Paul has found himself in Acts chapter 17. That's actually an artist's rendition of what Athens, Greece probably would have looked like around the time. The ruins still exist. What you have at the top there is called the Acropolis. And this was like, again, a huge hub. And again, people to this very day could go visit the Acropolis. There's a remake of it, I believe, in Nashville, Tennessee, where the Tennessee Titans play. Titans, that comes from Greek culture and lore, for those that don't know. But who likes the Tennessee Titans anyway? But again, this is what it would look like. This is a cultural hub. And this was where Paul finds himself as he's engaging a culture that's very different than his own. But he sees the need. He sees their need for Jesus Christ. And we're going to look at this passage along the way. And we're going to see some things that Paul did when it came to being a person of influence. Influence begins with people. How do we engage people that are different from us? How do we approach people? How do we influence people? If influence starts with people, then we need to know how to talk with people. And not just people, but people who might not look and act like us. So in Acts chapter 17, we're going to start in verse 16, and we're just going to read along in parts. We're going to stop, and then we're going to start back up again. So Acts chapter 17, starting verse 16, it says this. Now, while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him. He saw that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and devout persons, and in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. Some, Some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also conversed with him. We'll go more about them in a little bit. And some of them said, "What does this babbler wish to say?" Others said, "He seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection." And they took him and brought him to the Areopagus and saying, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? For you bring some strange things to our ears. We wish to know, therefore, what these things mean." Now, all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing except telling and hearing something new. Again, come back to the point of what Athens is, right? Athens was, if you could make it here, you can make it anywhere. They want new things. What's the newest, latest thing? What's the newest fad? What's the newest trend? So we could take it and we could run with it. We could ride that wave. And here's what I want to see in this first part of this passage. Paul met the culture where they are, not the other way around. Paul met the culture where they are, not the other way around. There were two groups of people that were mentioned in this passage. The first one that we saw were the Epicureans. The Epicureans. What is an Epicurean? We actually have a website to this day called Epicurus.com, which deals about food. Most of the time you hear about Epicurus or Epicurean, it's usually food related. But at that time, the Paul's time, it had more to do with the context of pleasure. Truth and goodness are tied to pleasure. If I am feeling great, if there's no pain, if there's no sorrow, and it feels good, then inherently it must be good. It must be moral. It must be great. And we should lean more into this. Sometimes it was food and drink. Sometimes it was sexual pleasure. Sometimes it was saying what you want to say because you're feeling how you feel. You just need to let it out. It doesn't matter what it is. In other words, like if you're a true Epicurean, it's Thanksgiving time, and you know what? Your mother-in-law, she's just gone too far, and it is good and moral to let your mother-in-law know how you feel on Thanksgiving. Epicureans. Some of you are like, I want to join this team. Exactly, right? That's how it works. They were the Epicureans. They had rivals there, the Epicureans. They were called the Stoics. The best way I could describe a Stoic is like Spock from Star Trek. They're the complete opposite. Goodness has nothing to do with emotion. It's emotion. It's pulled away from emotion. It's all logic. It's all sound. It's all reason. Is it reasonable? Is it logic? Can it be proven? Can it be falsified? Can it be verified? That's all that matters. The more I pull emotion out of it, the better it is. So this is basically the guy who's at the birthday party. Happy birthday to you. You know, it's your 30th wedding anniversary. Yay, so great, so happy. You know, it's the person who graduates, right? It's graduation. Woo! Thank you for this prestigious opportunity for me to get my diploma today. I'm so happy that's a Stoic. Some of you know Stoics. Some of you married Stoics. So again, you're elbowing them right now. Exactly. This is what happens. We have Stoic people in our life. And again, I think it's best exemplified by Spock and who Spock is. In other words, it's only logical. Live long and prosper. These are the people Paul engaged. He engaged them. He went to where they were. And again, the Epicureans and the Stoics weren't really the bestest of friends. They were actually philosophical rivals. He went to both of them. He didn't pick and choose. Take that for what it's worth. He didn't pick and choose which group of people were worth his time and who were worth the gospel of Jesus Christ. He picked the people who were there and he engaged them. He went to them. He went where they were at. There was a day in church culture where many churches would have bells, and they would be rung for different reasons, sometimes for holidays, sometimes for the tolling of the hour. But for some churches, they would ring it to let you know that they were here. We're here. Ding dong, we're here. Bong, bong, we're here. And at the core, what is that culturally basically communicating? We're here. All of you lousy sinners, come to us. We're here. You need some Jesus. Come to us because you need some Jesus. Paul went the other way around entirely. He left where it was comfortable and went to the uncomfortable and met people where they were at, and he didn't pick and choose who was worthy of God's grace and goodness. I'll say that again. He didn't pick and choose over who was worthy of God's grace and goodness. He met people where they were at, regardless of what they wore, regardless of what they thought, regardless if they did or didn't have tattoos, whether they had long hair, whether their shirt was untucked, whether their skirt may have been 1 or 2 inches a little bit too high, it doesn't matter. We meet Jesus, we bring Jesus, and we meet people where they are at. Sounds like a good idea in practice, or a good idea on paper. Paul put it in practice. Let's continue on. Acts chapter 17, starting in verse 22. Says this. So Paul, he has this opportunity. Again, the Stoics and the Epicureans are like, we got to put this guy out here because it sounds like he's doing something new. We're going to test kitchen this thing. So he now has an opportunity. This place called the Areopagus, which is basically like, it was part of the Acropolis. It was like in the north, I think, west corner of the Acropolis. Culturally speaking, historically speaking, they said like Hades was put on trial there, as a matter of fact. They say Hades was put on trial there at one point. And so this is where, law was done. This is where culture is done. This is where decisions were made. And Paul is now standing in the midst of the Areopagus, and he says this, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. For I passed along and observed objects of your worship. I found also an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place. And they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. And even as one of your poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring." Paul spoke their language. Paul spoke their language. Again, I'm the student pastor here. I work with middle schoolers, high schoolers, and college students most of my time. Most of my time is dealing with the young folks, if you will. And it's getting more and more realistic of like how much the generational gap is even happening now with me. My wife reminds me of how I'm getting old. I'm one of the coaches for our soccer ministry in the spring. And I remember this one particular moment this past spring. One of the kids that I deal with the kindergartners for soccer. One of the kindergartners, their shoe was untied. I'm kneeling down and tying their shoe. And they go, "Coach Josh, your hair is gray." Thanks. Thanks. I am. I'm turning gray. And, Paul spoke their language. And I don't know, we talk about like speak the language of the people, speak their language. And for me with young people, the first thing I think of is the meme that's been around with Steve Buscemi from 30 Rock. And it's basically like him, like being as old as could be, trying to infiltrate like a high school. It's like, how do you do, fellow kids? Yeah, like it just feels really awkward and weird sometimes to speak someone's language that's not your own. But see, Paul didn't make it so awkward. He made it seamless. And part of the reason he made it seamless was at some point along the way, he was educated, but also he did his research. He clearly had to have known what was going on around the time. One example of this was having to do with, he mentioned the inscription of an unknown God. Now, most people nowadays, we observe what's called a monotheistic religion. Most people are monotheistic. Most, around these parts anyway, are monotheistic, which means one God. It's a fancy way of saying we worship one God. We do it in Christianity, of course, Judaism, and also Islam. There is one God, Allah, right? It's monotheistic. There's one deal. There's one guy. There's one person. There's one entity. Monotheistic. But see, at the time of that, of Paul's time, they were what you call polytheistic. There are many gods, and Greece had many gods. We know many of them because we watched Hercules, and we had to go through literature classes. Everyone knows Zeus and Hera. And then if you watch Percy Jackson, you know about Poseidon, and you know about Hades. And again, we know a lot of these people. They're like characters, almost like superheroes for us now. They were like they're superhero type entities. And because they're polytheistic, and again, Greece being that hub, which is kind of funny because when Rome took over, they basically just took the Greek pantheon and kind of made it their own, if you will. It was like, I want a god of war like Hades. We have Hades at home. The Hades at home was Mars. That's how it worked, basically. But they have all these gods, and they want a shrine to each of them. We want to make sure that everyone gets their due. So we have one to Zeus. We have one to Ares. We have one to Aphrodite. We have one to each and every one. But just in case we missed one, we have one to the unknown God. In other words, in case we missed you, we don't want to feel your wrath. Please don't punch us. We made a thing. It's kind of like, it's like when you're going to a thing, you realize it was a birthday party, and you're like, oh no, I forgot a gift. Well, just put my name on that one. It'll be fine. You like piggyback off, if you will. You go to the dollar store real quick. Just me? Am I the only one who's ever done this? Like, yeah, just me. Maybe it's just me. You have to go like the dollar store or the Walgreens really fast and like grab something. It's kind of like that. It's like, I thought you were expecting me. Oh, we did. We have a shrine for you. It's right here. That's basically what they were doing with this unknown God shrine. In the event that there's a God that comes along, we don't want to incur that God or goddess's wrath. So we have a shrine just for them. And so, the one that we don't know yet, the one we haven't met yet, here it is right here. And Paul mentions that. You have a shrine to an unknown God. Let me tell you who that unknown God is. And he starts with there. He introduces the concept of the unknown God and says, you don't have to have him be unknown anymore. I'm here to tell you about him. I know him. Allow me to share. And he segues into that. But then another interesting thing happens here. At the very end, he quotes how, we're all his children, if you will. And again, our culture, we say to you now, we're all God's children. We're God's children, things like that. But for them, he's actually quoting a poet of their time. The poet's name is Aratus, and he wrote a poem called The Phenomena. And he's phenomena. Anyway, so phenomena, right? And here's the lines from the phenomena. This is actually what he was quoting. And I'm pointing out the whole section for its context because there's something interesting here. Here's what it says. Let us begin with Zeus, whom we mortals never leave unspoken. For every street, every marketplace is full of God. Even the sea and the harbor are full of this deity. Everywhere, everyone is indebted to God, for we are indeed his offspring. That's the poem he's quoting. Wait a second, that's Zeus. You're absolutely right. Zeus is a pagan god. Also correct. But remember, he's speaking their language. He's meeting them where they are at. He's speaking their language, and he's not waiting for them to come to him. He's going to them, and he's using their language and their culture to point them to some great spiritual truth. Sometimes, guys, when we share Christ with others, we may find ourselves in situations that are untested waters, uncharted waters, if you will. That's normal. We see this with Paul. Let me give you a real-world example of what this looks like, one that I experienced myself when I was living in Texas. When I was in Texas, the Pope at the time was John Paul II. And for those that were back in the days of John Paul II, you remember his final years, let's be real, we were thinking is he dead already? He's not looking too hot. Pope John Paul II wasn't looking too great. Many of our friends here in the house and many of us watching online may have had a Catholic background. Pope John Paul was not looking very good. And then I remember the day Pope John Paul II passed away. And I remember this very vividly because of this. Where I was living in the time was a huge Latino suburb area. I would say about 90% of the area was Latino. If you want to get directions anywhere where I lived, you better habla some Espanol or you're going to be in serious trouble real fast. If you want to get the good tacos, you better know how to speak Spanish. That's all I'm saying. That's where I was from. That's where I was living at the time. Now, I don't know if you also know this, but the Latino community, traditionally, very Catholic. Very Catholic. And also, regretfully, traditionally, many of them are what I would define as culturally Catholic. In other words, it really doesn't matter if you go to Mass. It really doesn't matter if there's a real faith there kind of thing. It's just, this is what my grandmama did, so this is what I do. And I wear a cross. Does the cross really mean anything? No, not really, but I'm wearing it because my grandmama told me I had to. I got a picture of Mary in my house. Do I know anything about her? No, not really, but my grandmama told me I had to. And she said that she's pretty cool, so I guess I'll put a picture of Mary. But as far as any relational connection, as far as any spiritual connection, there really isn't much there. But if you ask, like, hey, what are our faith? Oh, I'm Catholic, because it was a cultural thing. Don't judge too hard. I know a lot of people would say the same thing about Baptists. Have they ever graced the door of a Baptist church? No, but my grandmama was Baptist, and she went to a Baptist church, so I guess I'm Baptist too. That's just how our culture is. Not hating, just saying. But you have to remember, the Pope, if you didn't know, again, because some of us Baptists, we don't know about Catholic stuff, allow me to explain. The Pope, kind of a big deal. He's kind of a thing. He's like the Coke of Catholicism. I mean, he's pretty huge, right? He passes away. And I'm in this suburb, this neighborhood in this community that's mostly Latino, mostly Catholic. Now, here's what happened next. Many of the establishments in the area took their flags and put them at half-staff. Now, remember, the president's only supposed to decree things like that. Yeah, you're right. But they did it anyway. Why? Because it's a sign. It communicates. It's a symbol. It's to say, we care. We see what you're doing. We see what you're going through. We know there's a rough time. And we stand with you in solidarity as this person who's important to your faith, important to your culture, just passed away. It was an example of saying, we love you. We care about you. We see you. And I'm serious. What I say, just about every building did it. I'm talking about the McDonald's. I'm talking about the AutoZone. I'm talking about the 24/7 cash checking place. They have those out there too. Yeah, the 24/7 cash checking place, all the flags at half-staff because of Pope John Paul II. Except for one place, the local Baptist church. All the way up. We ain't going to fly our flag at half-staff for him. And this is true. A church did this. We're not going to do it for him because the president did order this. And we're going to stand on principle because that's what we do. We stand on principle. And the president didn't order this. I tell you that story to tell you this. The very next summer, I'm coming back in town. I was here on holiday. I come back into Texas, and I see that Baptist church's flag at half-staff. They're the only one. And I'm like, what happened? Did like a president die? Like what? No, the pastor's father-in-law passed away, and he ordered the flag to be flown at half-staff for the passing of his father-in-law. What? 6 months ago, we stand on principle. 6 months later, we care, we love, and we're all about. Why didn't we care and love about the community we were in? I don't know if you guys know this. The Baptists and the Catholics have had a historical Hatfield and McCoy relationship. That wasn't the point, though. This is our community. This is our people. This is where they're from. This is their culture. We talk about how we want to communicate the love of Christ to people. And this was like a low-hanging fruit opportunity. 2 minutes of your time just to take the rope and and tie it back and you're done. Just to communicate a symbol to say we care about you, we love you, we see you, we know you're hurting. And if you're looking for a place, here it is, because we love you. 5 minutes, 2 minutes for someone just to go out and just move the rope half away. No, we stand on principle. That church should be called Ichabod Baptist Church because the Spirit of the Lord had left them. It's sad in more ways than one. Here was our chance. Here was our opportunity. The church could have done something, and it didn't. Here's our opportunity to speak the language of the people here. We didn't. Here's our chance to engage people and let them know that we didn't. We didn't. And who's praised? Who's glorified? Paul used a poem and communicated the love of Christ using their language, their culture, their style, and met them where they were at. Let's continue on. Acts chapter 17, starting in verse 29. says this, being then God's offspring, we ought not to think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of man. The times of ignorance God overlooked. But now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. Of course, referring to Jesus. Now, when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, but others said, we will hear you again about this. So Paul went out from their midst, but some of the men joined him and believed, among whom were also Dionysius, the Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. Here's the thing. He presents Christ to them. Some laughed, some thought about it, some accepted. Paul was simply faithful. Here's the thing. I don't think it's so much that some of us don't mind being hated. I think some of us actually revel in the idea that, like, we call them trolls, right? Like, some people like just to throw things out there just to cause a stir controversy. But I think it's not so much the fear of being hated, or like maybe sometimes it's the other way. It's the desire we want to be loved and we want to be liked. Especially in the younger generations, I've noticed this. The culture is driven by being liked and appreciated. There's actually been a generational shift that's taken place over the last 15, 20 some odd years, where if you ask many children now what they want to be when they grow up, there was a day where many of us would say the traditional ones, right? Like, I want to be a veterinarian, an astronaut, a doctor, a nurse. Those are usually some of the big ones, right? You know what many of the current generation wants to be, the vast majority? Famous. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be famous. That's their goal. That's their desire. We want to be liked. We want to be loved. We want to be accepted. And here we are following Jesus, and we're told that we need to minister, we need to influence, we need to engage. But what happens when it gets awkward? What happens when it gets weird? Here's the thing, and we see all three in this passage, right? As he explains Jesus Christ and the resurrection from the dead, which for many, was preposterous. It was absolutely laughable. It was laughable that a God would die and come back again. This is absolutely comical. This is pure comedy. The problem is Paul wasn't laughing. Oh my gosh, he's being really serious. Oh wow, you got me, Paul. And they walked away. Then there were some that kind of just like rubbed their chin. This is very interesting. We're going to have to continue on this later. Or it may have been like, a door-to-door salesman, like, can you come back later? Oh, yeah, I'm very interested. I'll buy the thing in 2 weeks kind of thing. It may have been those guys too, right? They don't want to they want to be harsh, but at the same time, they're not really going to buy in kind of thing. It's like your friend with the multi-level marketing thing, like, oh, this thing's so awesome. I'll think about it. Throw it away. That's how it works, right? But then there were people who did accept, who did follow through and accept Jesus Christ. In other words, it wasn't all for naught. Here's the thing, though. Paul was faithful. All three scenarios played out for him in that moment. There were people who laughed at him and walked away. There were people who sat and thought about it, and there were people who instantly accepted and followed through in faith with Jesus Christ. It didn't matter. All that mattered was Paul was faithful. We are given platforms. We are given opportunities. We are given great opportunities, great things to share Christ with people. I don't know if you knew this, but apparently in the eyes of some people, I'm magical. I'm not, but they think I am. And here's why. Like, I must be magical. Because here's what happens sometimes. And I'm not hating, I'm just telling you how it is. Pastor Josh, come, I need to talk to you. Yeah, what's going on? I have a friend, and they need Jesus, and I need you to go talk to them about Jesus. Okay, who's your friend? Oh, it's my friend of like 20 years. Your friend of 20 years? Yeah, my friend of 20 years, he needs Jesus. You talk to him about Jesus. I'm going to talk to him about Jesus. I've known him for 2 minutes. You've known him for 20 years, and you want me to talk to him about Jesus? Yeah, you talk to him about Jesus. And don't get me wrong. If you want me to talk to Jesus about someone, I'll talk to Jesus about someone. But the reality is, in a situation like that, you knew the dude for 20 years. You have avenues and places that I can't go to and I can't fully understand. I could try to crash course my research and understand the language and the culture, and to be frank, I'm kind of fast when it comes to learning stuff. I really am. Have you watched my Throwback Thursday videos? Like, again, I read all day long. It's insane. But the reality is that we have an avenue with the people around us more so than me or Pastor Albert ever will. I'm not magical. But maybe you are. because you're that person God's placed in that time and in that situation. One of my favorite stories about this actually comes from one of the guitarists for Korn. His name's Brian Welch. Korn is a rock band that really took off in the late 90s and in 2000s. And there he is right there. Brian, tattoos, dreads, and all. And he, by his own testimony, admits here's what happened with him. And that is he had a daughter, and he hated the mother of his daughter because she was a drug addict. And he basically said to himself, I hated her for what she did and what the situation she put my daughter in, and I swore I was never going to do that. And then lo and behold, I was a self-fulfilling prophecy. I became the same thing she was. I was addicted to meth. He's like, I'm doing a European tour, and I'm literally watching the FedEx tracker number as my drug dealer is FedExing me my drugs, and I'm tweaking out over here, freaking out, trying to get my drugs. And he's like, in the midst of all this, he's like, I'm addicted to drugs. My life is spinning out of control. And then on top of that, he mentioned how his daughter is now singing a Korn song called Adidas, which, by the way, in their song, stands for All Day I Dream About Sex. He's like, I'm addicted to drugs. My daughter's singing All Day I Dream About Sex. My life is an absolute mess. He's like, I needed help. He's like, in the midst of this, I had my real estate broker. His name was Eric. And he said, listen, Brian, I don't want to be weird or anything, and I don't really do this a whole lot, but I want to share something with you. It's a verse out of the Bible, out of Scripture. It comes from Matthew chapter 11. Jesus says, come to me, all you are weak and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. And he said that whole week, he's like, I took that small little word from my real estate broker. He's like, I went home, I found a Bible, I opened it up. He's like, I broke down every single one of those words. What does it mean to be weary? What does it mean to be heavy burden? And he said to himself, he's like, I am those things. I am weary. I am heavy burden. I need rest. He walked into a church on Sunday morning. And again, there's performance, there's singing, there's all kinds of things. And in the back, he gave his life to Jesus Christ, but it didn't end there. He then goes home and he goes back to the same drugs he was addicted to. And it was in that moment he looks up and he prays to God. He's like, God, I want to follow after you, but you got to take these drugs away. I got to be a better father for my daughter. And his spirit moved over Brian in such a way that he's been drug-free ever since. And he actually is now a speaker for people who deal with drug addiction. He left Korn for a while. He's now back with them. And it's like he went back to that crazy rock band. He did. And as a result, there are other members of the band who have now given their lives to Jesus Christ as well. Why? Because one real estate broker, we ain't talking Hollywood, we ain't talking New York, we ain't talking some fancy pastor on the platform, just a real estate broker calmly sharing a verse about Jesus Christ in a time the guy needed it. What platforms and opportunities has God given you in your life? Who do you need to give a Bible verse to? See what happens. Coming up here at Holiday Hill, we have some wonderful opportunities. One of them is the Go Green team at Holiday Hill Elementary, was mentioned in our announcement. September 25th, Saturday, September 25th. Meeting people where they're at. Members of the community are going to come together and clean up our local elementary school. Meet people where they're at. Speak their language. Another one is an opportunity I don't think we talked about too much out loud. It's called Search and Rescue. It's going to be basically a training event that takes place on October. I believe it's October the 9th. It's a Saturday. And it's basically talking about sharing our testimony. Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. Where do I put my hands when I tell people about, do I put them up here like Ricky Bobby? I don't know where to put my hands. Like, is that what you do? Like, yeah, Search and Rescue. We're going to talk about this stuff. Talk about how to reach people and share our testimony. And these are wonderful opportunities that are coming up for us. But I encourage you, wherever you're at in your life, seize opportunity. Seize opportunity like Paul did. People gave their lives to Jesus Christ. Some of them rejected, yeah. But the requirement was to be faithful. My encouragement to you, church family, today is to be faithful where God has put you. Be faithful there. I'll throw this one out as a freebie. Being faithful is more than just putting a Jesus fish or a Bible verse on your business card, by the way. You know how you can make an impact as an entrepreneur or business owner? Be an honest businessman. Be kind to your employees. Be respectful to your customers. It'll do more than a Bible verse ever will. There's your freebie. If you need that, there it is. But whatever it is, consider the following. You've been given opportunities and platforms, places that I can't get to, places that Pastor Albert can't get to, but you can get to. God has put people in your life that you can engage and talk to. You know their language, you know their culture, you know their background. Share that. God's goodness and grace is too good to just throw to the wayside. When we engage people, there are people who need this. We need this. I need this. You need this. Don't pick and choose. Engage the people. Influence the people that God has put in your life. At this moment, we're going to have the worship team come on up, and they're going to sing one final song. I'll be off here to the side with my mask on if you want to come up and pray. Also, after the conclusion of the service, I'll be in the lobby area. If you're watching online, and maybe God's Spirit has moved in your heart in such a way, and you're watching online, you can mention one on the YouTube chat that maybe you want someone to talk and pray with you. That'd be wonderful. If you're here in the auditorium today, and maybe you don't want to come up or talk right now, there's a card. You can respond with the card in the seat in front of you. Or like I said, you come see me up here. You can come see me in the back later. Maybe you're looking for a church home. Gosh, we'd love to have you. Again, there's many ways you can respond. But regardless of which way you pick, if there's a time to respond, pick your way, pick whichever way you want and go with it now. Because if you're looking for a moment, now is your time.